One mic recording.
Grabando.
Vale.
Cámara 1.
It's music.
Yes. Hola, tengo el placer hoy de entrevistar a Benjamin Rivers, que aparte de psicoterapeuta es practicante de teatro aplicado y ha tenido experiencias muy interesantes en Egipto, en Palestina y bueno, es un referente del teatro playback y me gustaría mucho, ya que tenemos la oportunidad de contar con él, saber un poco cuál es su visión sobre el teatro playback, que nos cuente un poco cómo ha sido su experiencia vital y ver qué podemos aprender de él. Creo que va a ser una entrevista muy interesante. Y la vamos a hacer en inglés porque es el idioma que más nos conviene. Vamos a poner los subtítulos aquí para que todo el mundo nos pueda entender. So, hi, Ben, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
First of all, I wanted to ask you about your vision about what playback theater is and what can it do for people.
I feel like playback theatre is different things for different people. For actors, for example, it's one thing, and for the audience, it's something else. For people in the audience of a playback theatre performance, playback theatre gives a chance for people to share true stories from their life and have them heard and witnessed by other people in the audience. And that experience can be very validating, to feel that you are being deeply listened to and respected, that your story has a resonance with other people. For actors, on the other hand, playback theatre is something else. Actors usually belong to a playback theatre company who meets regularly, and in the process of training, we're sharing stories with each other, sometimes over a period of years. Some companies have been together for more than 20 years. And so very deep relationships are formed between the company members. It can feel like a family, a place of refuge for the company members. So there's that dimension of the experience for actors, but also you are developing your artistic skills in a very specific manner, in contrast to most other forms of art. In playback theatre, we are really training our ability to empathize in the moment with an individual and to turn their story instantly into a compelling piece of theatre, which takes a lot of skill and practice to develop. So for actors belonging to a playback theatre company, there's also this wonderful artistic challenge along with the human challenge of developing empathy.
And from a perspective of a community, and I'm thinking about Galicia because we are now trying to introduce playback here, and how can community as a whole benefit from it?
So playback can be applied in different contexts. For example, if there has been a disaster of some kind, a natural disaster, a flood or a fire, playback can be used to help the community to process their experience. In that sense, it can be used as a kind of collective trauma response, and it has been used in that way around the world over the decades. It has been used as a form of collective trauma response. But it can also be used to help a community to reflect on their own history, the challenges and successes of a community. So, for example, playback is often used at conferences where the participants at a conference might be reflecting on their experience as a community that may have existed for a few days or for many years. Playback theatre can also be used as a form of cultural activism for communities that experience oppression. The opportunity to share stories of injustice gives people a chance to educate and raise the awareness of other people who might not be so intimately aware of what it's like to experience certain forms of discrimination. So, for example, in Palestine, where I lived and worked for a number of years, I trained a group of Palestinian actors, and we were going to communities that were experiencing high levels of political violence from Israel. And the people in those communities were able to share stories about their homes being demolished, their olive trees being cut down by settlers, members of the community being disappeared and tortured by the Israeli army. And often in the audience of these performances, we would have diplomats from other countries, we would have journalists, we would have activists, we'd have researchers, we'd have artists, people that could take these stories back to their own communities and societies. So in that context, playback was serving the community as a sort of like an adjunct to their existing political activities.
So, playback theatre is often connected to the word trauma and healing. And there is some debate around that, but you are a psychotherapist. I want to know your view about how playback may be a helpful tool for healing or trauma.
Well, I can share a story that will answer your question. When I was living in Jenin refugee camp in Palestine, I was working with the Freedom Theatre, a Palestinian cultural organization, and we organized a playback theatre performance for people who had been imprisoned because of their political beliefs or their political activities. And in this performance, there was a young man who came forward to tell his story, and he described the different forms of torture that he experienced while he was in prison. And this experience of torture had a very deep impact on him. It was very, very disturbing. And after his release, he never really got back to his normal self. He said that every day he would wake up saturated by the disturbing memories of what happened to him in prison. And so he shared his story. The actors did a good job of performing it. The audience were very warm in their response. And then the next day, I met with this young man and I asked him some questions about his experience of the night before. First, I asked him what motivated him to share his story. And he said that in the audience, there were many, many young men, and he was aware that most of those young men would probably end up in prison. That's the statistic, that's the reality of life in Palestine, that most young men end up getting imprisoned because of their political beliefs. So he wanted them to be prepared in some way for the realities they would experience when they ended up in prison, because somehow if we are prepared for hardship and we know more accurately the different types of hardship we are going to experience, it has less of an impact. You're more resilient. So he had an altruistic motivation. His motivation was to help other people by telling his story. But he said that he was surprised that he also benefited greatly from the experience. He said that when he shared his story for the first time in all the years since being in prison and after his release, he said for the first time he felt like there was a kind of healthy distance between himself and that experience. It was no longer saturating him. He also said that witnessing the actors, who were also Palestinians, witnessing them listening so attentively and then embodying his story was deeply comforting. He didn't feel so alone in his experience. Other people were joining him. So this helped to lift and relieve some of the burden that he was carrying. And of course, with trauma, this is one of the most disturbing aspects of trauma, that we often feel very alone, very isolated in our experience. So there's something about being able to share and connect and feel that somebody else really gets you, that can help to release and relieve some of the burden that you're carrying. So he had that experience. And then he also said that after the performance, many people in the audience came up to him and thanked him for sharing his story. And some people said that they too had been to prison and had experienced similar things, but they had been too afraid to speak about it publicly. And so they were, very grateful that he had exhibited that courage. And for him, there was this sense of connection to a wider circle of people, this community that so many people had resonated and benefited from him telling his story. So that gave his experience a sense of meaning, which is also really important on the road to recovery from trauma, is finding some way to make meaning of your experience. So these are some of the ways that playback can be helpful. There are also some risks involved in playing back traumatic stories. So we also need to be mindful of those.
Mm-hmm. I will ask you later about your experience in the West Bank, but I wanted to make you a question about playback theater yet, and before this, and is this thing about psychodrama, how much we can consider playback by itself therapeutic or not, how much psychodrama still lives on playback theater or not, how enacting traumatic experience can be harmful. All these topics, I think, may be interesting to talk about. What do you think about those?
So the first question is
about psychodrama and playback theater, the relationship. Well, I forgot to say you are a psychodramatist also.
Yeah. So Jonathan Fox came up with the idea of playback theatre. It was then developed by Joe Salas and other members of the original playback theatre company along with Jonathan. But Jonathan himself was a trained psychodramatist, and so psychodrama had an influence on playback from the very beginning. In psychodrama, one of the very basic elements of psychodrama is sharing your story and then having other members of the group embody different characters in your story, different elements of your story. So there's that similarity with playback. The difference is that in psychodrama, the teller, who in psychodrama we call the protagonist plays an active role in the process. So you have the opportunity, for example, to interact with other people in your story. If I'm doing a piece of work about my relationship with my mother, for example, in psychodrama, I have the opportunity to speak to my mother. In playback theatre, the teller has more of a passive role. They sit and observe, they witness the enactment. So this is a key difference. There's also a difference of intention. So in psychodrama, the intention is to use the process for healing and for personal growth. Playback theatre, in contrast, although it often is used in a therapeutic context, this was not the main purpose behind playback when it was formed, and it's certainly not the main purpose for most playback theatre companies. The main purpose of playback was to build a connection between members of a community. So it was more of a community building tool, if you like, methodology. So there's a difference there of intention between psychodrama and playback theatre. The other difference is that playback theatre requires a lot of skill to be an actor. You need to you need to undergo a certain training, and then you need to participate in regular rehearsals, and sometimes it takes many years for a company to really reach a high level of ability. In contrast, with psychodrama, the therapist, of course, needs many, many years of training, but the participants are not trained actors. They are members of a therapeutic group. So that there's a big difference there also. I'm sure there's other differences that I'm not mentioning, but those are some that come to mind at the moment.
And let's talk about trauma, because maybe we can imagine that if we are successful, more groups in Galicia may come, or people just watching us may be interested in do playback theater and not harm anybody. So what are good practices to help and not harm?
So I feel the first and most important task for the conductor and for the rest of the playback theatre company is to create a safe and welcoming container for the audience. And there are different ways of doing that. But the reason it's important is that people are not going to open up, usually, they're not going to open up and share very deep or very vulnerable stories unless they feel some degree of trust in the performers and the conductor, and some degree of safety in the space. So I feel that's important. And then if somebody does share a story that contains very disturbing or distressing material for that person, usually we try to avoid enacting the story in a very realistic, naturalistic way, because we don't want that person to have to relive the traumatic experience. That could be re-traumatizing for the teller. We need to be especially mindful of this if we're working with a community that has suffered a similar trauma. So if we're performing to a group of refugees, for example, that have lived through war trauma, you might have somebody come to the teller's chair and tell a very disturbing story about surviving genocide, for example. That person may be able to tolerate watching their story being enacted, but there may be other people in the audience who also lived through that genocide, and they don't have the same resilience, and it would be extremely disturbing for them to have to watch a very realistic enactment. So there are ways that the actors can represent the truth of the teller's experience, but in a way that isn't so literal. And that's one of the things that we train in as playback practitioners.
To be more specific about that, maybe I'm thinking about some medium forms or some way of telling the story without a literal enactment, but the person representing the narrative, an actor representing the narrative of the person, or something like that, or what would you suggest for doing so?
So, for example, there's one form that some companies call tableau, where you see the story enacted in a series of still images. So the story is usually concentrated into 5 tableaus, 5 still images that represent the most important elements of the story. This is one way that we can play back a traumatic story without having to see the scenes acted out in a very literal way. We can also use slow motion, for example. We still see the the action taking place, but it's slowed down. It's no longer realistic. It's no longer naturalistic. We can use metaphor as well. Maybe there's a poetic image that represents the moment of violence. So we all understand what that image represents. We're still honoring the experience of the teller, but we're kind of creating what we call in drama therapy aesthetic distance. We're using aesthetics to create some distance that allows the person to see their traumatic experience from another perspective. Those are some of the thoughts that come to mind. I mean, we can use narration. The danger there is that we've already heard the teller tell the story. So if we then watch the actors telling it again, it can be a bit redundant. So I would be more in favour of the actors finding a more creative way to translate the teller's experience using images, using action rather than simply telling the story again in words.
Nice. I would like now to learn more about your personal experience and less about playback theatre in general. And first of all, I would like to know more about how did you started with all this? I know you started to get in touch with this scenic arts through circus in Australia, but you were born in Scotland, if I don't remember badly. So how was your early journey in life until you learn about playback theatre?
Yeah, so during my adolescent years, I began to explore the performing arts through circus and physical theatre and different types of dance. And those experiences were very, very important for me in my development. I found through the performing arts a way to channel and express these forces, these energies that were alive inside of me, including this creative urge that I believe is present and is alive inside of each person. But for me, it was a very exciting period in my life. And I was very grateful to have opportunities to do workshops, to do trainings, to work with fantastic teachers. So that was a very formative period. Later, when I became an adult, I became much more serious and more focused on a serious career, and I kind of put the performing arts aside for many, many years. I was studying social work, and then I was working in different agencies and different settings. And one of the places I ended up working was in a maximum security prison. I was working there as a social worker. And one of the other workers had brought in different artists to work with the prisoners, poets, visual artists, musicians. And I remember going to a performance at the end of this project where the prisoners were reciting poetry that they had written, and they were playing music, and I was so deeply moved because for all these years I'd been relating to the prisoners in a very kind of rigid, dry manner, and suddenly I was seeing their beauty, their creativity, their humanity, and it really awakened me to the power and the possibility of the arts, especially for community development and health and so on. And I reawakened my own interest in the arts and started looking around for a theatre group that I could join, and I came across Hobart Playback Theatre Company in Tasmania. I ended up doing a workshop with them and then an audition. I got accepted into the company and went through their training process and became very deeply involved in playback theatre. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you left the company when you traveled to the United States, if I...
That's right, yeah. So through playback theatre, I became interested in drama therapy and psychodrama, but in Australia at that time, there was no professional training program. There were no universities that were offering degrees. And I had the opportunity to go to America, where I did a master's degree in counseling psychology with a concentration in drama therapy. So that's where I was really able to learn more about psychodrama and drama therapy.
And there in California, you also joined another playback theatre group?
Yeah, I joined a playback theatre group called Kairos, and we were mostly what I would call an activist playback group. We performed in shelters for homeless people. We performed for migrant communities experiencing different types of injustice. We performed in solidarity with Palestine. It was quite different to the sort of playback that I'd been doing with the company in Australia, where we would have a monthly public performance, usually in the same theatre, every month, and the public would pay a ticket to come and see us, or we would perform for organizations or for conferences, very specific settings. But with Kairos, almost all of our performances were unpaid. We didn't get grants. We would really go wherever we were called, wherever we were asked to perform, where there was some kind of social justice context.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And you were in California for a year or more?
I think I was there for 4 years.
A lot more than
yeah.
A lot more than I thought.
Yeah.
And it was all the time during doing this master's degree?
Well, I did my master's degree and then I graduated and I worked. I worked there.
And the next stage in your life is already in Palestine.
Then I went to Palestine.
And how does one end up going to Palestine? How did it work for you?
So I was doing a PhD, a doctorate degree in peace and conflict studies, and I was researching the role of playback theatre in conflict zones. And I reached out to the Freedom Theatre in Palestine and asked whether it would be possible to come and do some research there. And we developed a dialogue, and they ended up inviting me to come and initiate and then lead a couple of programs, and they even employed me to do that. So I was very fortunate that I was able to live there and work there and also do my research at the same time.
And can you explain more about what the Freedom Theatre is? Because I think this is very interesting to share.
The Freedom Theatre is a Palestinian cultural organization based in Jenin refugee camp. And they use mainly theatre, but also film and other art forms to develop the artistic capacity of children and youth in Jenin refugee camp, but also to use arts as a form of resistance against Israeli apartheid, against the military occupation, against the settler colonialism that Palestinians live under. There's a kind of an understanding, a recognition that the arts can be a very potent tool for communicating the truth of people who are living under this terrible injustice, and a way to advocate for the conditions that Palestinians need to live under, you know, for the sort of for the end of apartheid, for the end of occupation. Jenin refugee camp is known for being a place of armed resistance, a place of militant activity. And so the Freedom Theatre, while it doesn't deny that armed resistance is often necessary, it poses itself also as an alternative, that there are other ways of fighting, there are other ways of doing resistance, and art and culture offers that.
How was your experience in Jenin, the Freedom Theatre, West Bank? What can you tell us about those years?
I witnessed many injustices. I saw firsthand what it's like to live under apartheid. I saw people, you know, losing their homes, losing their land, losing members of their family. I had friends and colleagues at the Freedom Theatre who were arrested, imprisoned, tortured for no reason other than the fact that they were artists. And artists are a threat to Israel, especially at the Freedom Theatre, where they're traveling the world, telling the story of what's happening in Palestine. So I witnessed these injustices, I witnessed these atrocities, and this awakened inside of me a kind of a determination to continue the struggle once I returned to my own country, to my own community, because, of course, Australia and other Western countries are all complicit in what's happening. We're supporting Israel in some way with our trade deals, with our military alliances and so on. So I felt, having lived in Palestine, having built these friendships, made these connections, having seen with my own eyes what was happening, and then realizing that my own country was somehow involved, made me feel a sense of responsibility to do something. Not only that, but I also have a family connection to what's happening in Palestine. My great-grandfather was a very prominent Zionist. He came from the Ukraine to Ottoman Palestine and played a role in the colonization of Palestine and also in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. He was a senior leader in the Jewish National Fund, which was responsible for displacing thousands of Palestinians. So I have a very sort of intimate connection, if you like, with what has happened in Palestine and what continues to happen there.
You talk about like an awakening of an inner drive to do something. What do you find more useful or rational, or what connects practically with this urge?
Well, because I'm a therapist, but I'm also a theatre practitioner, I try to serve with the tools that are available to me, whether it's teaching playback theatre in Palestine, knowing that it can be used as a form of cultural activism, or training Palestinian mental health workers, knowing that they'll be using drama therapy and psychodrama to build their own resilience or to address the impact of the violence that they live under. These are some of the ways that I've served or participated in the Palestinian struggle. But I also wrote a couple of years ago a play, a solo play, based on the story of my great-grandfather, and I've been touring that and performing that play around the world over the last couple of years, trying to raise more awareness about the roots of the injustices that we see today in Palestine and Israel.
And what is the reception of this play?
Well, mostly people are very open and eager to learn more, even if they consider themselves to be pro-Palestine, pro-justice, anti-genocide. There's still a lot that people don't know about the history, and this play is focusing very much on the origins of Zionism and the colonization of Palestine. So people often describe that they learn a lot by witnessing the play. I've also had in the audience Palestinian people and people from Syria and Lebanon who've also been impacted by Israeli aggression, and they have shared that they feel validated by the version of events that are portrayed in the play. They feel validated by this history that is presented. I've also had a few Zionists who have read the play or seen the play, and they tend to have a more defensive reaction. They tend to be more defensive of Zionism or defensive of Israel. So yeah, different reactions.
And do you feel like in some way this play is in a way kind of in the spirit of playback theatre, because you listen to a story that then you condensed in a more non-improvised and structured play, but is in a way also hearing something and then kind of giving it back?
I would say that playback theatre has helped me in some way. When we listen to many stories as a playback theatre practitioner, I think we develop a good sense of story and a good sense of how to structure a story as an actor. You know, we listen to a long narrative with many details, and we need to find a way of condensing that into a compelling narrative that we can present in a fairly short enactment. So I think having practiced for many years as a playback practitioner, I developed some of these skills, this ability to kind of structure a narrative, to this kind of inner director that is developed. I felt like that was very helpful for me. But there are also some things that are very different between playback theatre and creating a piece of devised theatre, such as my play. For one thing, the central protagonist is no longer alive. I was not able to have an in-person interview with him. I relied on historical texts. So yeah, I think there are some big differences also.
I was thinking about your great-grandfather. Do you think in some way it's weird that you feel that in some way you are responsible for responding for his acts?
In some ways, I feel a sense of responsibility to do everything I can to address the injustices that are continuing today. But I would hope that I would feel that way even if I didn't have a family member that had played a role in the colonization of Palestine. You know, because I feel that all of us in the West are complicit in some way because of our government's relationship with Israel. And even if, you know, if I was a citizen of South Africa, for example, where the government is really standing up to Israel, I would hope that, like South Africans, I would also feel compelled to act in solidarity with Palestinians because they're suffering. You know, that's the main reason that anyone should take action, not because of some personal historical connection. People are being slaughtered, There's a genocide taking place. There has been a dispossession, an ethnic cleansing taking place for decades. It's a terrible, terrible stain on our collective humanity. And so all of us, if we really take the time to open our heart and to listen and to look, to see, to hear, to understand what's really happening, all of us will feel moved in some way to do something independent of where we position ourselves in the world.
And as someone who studied what you did and your profession and and being a psychologist and working there, how come some people can develop such a big blindness to something like that and even act upon it very directly?
Well, I think I think there are many reasons, but conditioning and indoctrination play a very big role. So if you grow up in Israel, for example, you are indoctrinated from day zero with the idea that Arabs, Palestinians are less than human, that they are somehow intrinsically immoral, evil, savage, threatening, dangerous. These are ideas that are drummed into you. And this is convenient in a way because it then makes it much easier to command the citizens of a country that has been indoctrinated to commit genocide, to commit atrocities because somehow you feel justified in doing that. I'm doing this because I have to. If I don't kill them, they'll kill me. So indoctrination, I think, plays a big role, and this is a very obvious example. But even outside of Israel, we are indoctrinated to view certain lives as being more valuable and other lives as being less valuable. When the war in Ukraine happened, there was this kind of mass support. People wanted to donate, people wanted to host refugees, people wanted, to do whatever they could to help the suffering people of Ukraine because they're white and they're Christian, What about the people who are experiencing genocide in Sudan? We don't see the same level of empathy or concern there. And that's because of our conditioning, our indoctrination around race, to value white lives or Christian lives as being more valuable than, black or brown people living in the global south.
And there is sometimes when you face these truths, you feel like some kind of impotence, like you cannot do much, you cannot stop the war machine of Russia or Israel or whoever it is. So it feels frustrating, and I think that in some way that it also contributes to the inaction because you don't know exactly what can you do. How do you see that?
I think that's very, very normal and even appropriate because as an individual, we are pretty much powerless against the war machine, against these enormous economic forces, these forces of history. So of course we feel helpless, hopeless, powerless. That's normal. That's sort of a fairly appropriate response to this reality. But when we begin to connect with other people through groups, through a movement, when we begin to feel our collective strength, then other possibilities begin to open up. Look at any big change in history, the end of slavery, the right of women to vote, the right for queer folk to marry. I mean, these are monumental changes, right? Huge social institutions, social forces had to be shifted and moved for these changes to occur. And it wasn't lonely individuals that achieved these things. It was mass movements, often working for years and years, decades, before those achievements could be realized. I feel the same thing with Palestine. Of course, a part of me feels desperate and hopeless when I see the genocide continuing. I see Israel occupying more and more land, taking more and more control. Of course, I feel helpless. But then I also see millions of people all over the world every week going into the streets, organizing, raising awareness, resisting, engaging in boycotts, and all of this gives me hope that eventually, one day we will see the fruits of these actions. The other option, which is to give up and do nothing, that's not a choice that I could take and be able to face myself with respect. You know, I would rather be fighting for justice and fail, rather than give up and live in a sort of chosen ignorance.
Okay. Going back with your personal story, after you are living in Palestine for some years, you go to Egypt, of all places. Why Egypt? What happened?
So the playback theatre group that I trained from the Freedom Theatre, we were invited to perform in Egypt. And when I went, I took the group to Egypt. We did a series of performances. And while I was there, I was also invited to lead a playback theatre workshop in Cairo. And that was received really well. And I was invited to come back and lead a psychodrama workshop and more playback theatre trainings. And I was still living in Palestine, but I ended up sort of going back and forth to Egypt. And it was a very exciting time to be there. It was 2012, the year after the revolution. There was a wonderful energy that was still present. And after a couple of years developing friendships, relationships, connections, I ended up moving to Egypt and basing myself there.
And after that, you spent a lot of years in Egypt?
Yeah, I ended up living there for about 6 years.
Uh-huh. And I think you founded there, I don't remember exactly the name.
Dawar.
Dawar, yeah.
Yeah, so I founded an organization called Dawar Arts, which was founded in 2016, and we're about to have our 10-year anniversary next year.
Mm-hmm. Are you still involved with that or with the Freedom Theatre?
So with Dawar, I'm not involved in the daily operations, but I'm still involved. I'll be going back there later this year to lead a training. And I'm still in contact with the Freedom Theatre. I was supposed to go there last year to lead a training, but with the situation, it was not possible to go.
I think they had like military operations around.
Yeah, there were some threats to the airspace, and the flight companies that I had booked my flights with were cancelling. So my flights were cancelled. I booked new flights with another company, and that was cancelled as well, so I had to postpone my trip, unfortunately.
And now you live here in Vigo?
Yeah.
Of all places?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you end up here?
Well, at the moment I am studying Spanish. I'm not the world's best language learner, so wish me luck. I'm studying 2 days a week, or I should say 2 mornings a week, and the other days I'm working. I work online. My clients are in different countries. I work in English, so unfortunately I'm probably not practicing as much Spanish as I should be in order to progress as fast as I would like.
And how do you see your life from now to the future?
To the future? Well, I would like to be speaking Spanish in a year from now. That would be a great achievement that would make me very happy. I imagine myself continuing to do what I'm doing now, continuing to continuing to be involved in playback theatre, in the arts. I'm also very involved in the Roy Hart voice method that I've been studying and practicing for many years. It's another community also that I'm very connected to. So I hope I just continue to build on the relationships that are already important for me in my life. I'm aware that my life probably seems unusual to many people because I have lived in many different places, and I don't have one sort of solid home. I have homes. Mm-hmm. I have a home in Australia. I have a home here in Galicia. I feel a sense of strong connection to Egypt, to Palestine, to France. And in each of these places, there are people that I love, people that I've known for many years, friends, colleagues, comrades. And for me, it gives a sense of meaning to nourish and nurture these relationships. So that's my hope, that I can continue to cherish and develop these relationships over time.
Mm-hmm. So you will nourish all your homes around the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any more you want to tell that we have not covered yet?
I think that's all for now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to give a message to the potential incipient community of playback theatre in Galicia, or whichever playback people may be watching us, to close the interview?
Well, I'm aware that this is the 50-year anniversary of playback theatre, and this year there's an effort in the international community to honour and recognise and learn from the pioneers of playback theatre. And I do believe that's very important. It's really important to learn from our elders in the community, and to feel a sense of connection to the global community. So it's great, for example, that you and other members of the group here in Vigo will be going to the European gathering later this year, and that you went to the gathering last year. I hope that playbackers in Galicia can continue to do that, to go to the Iberian gathering, the European gathering, hopefully the international conference, to attend trainings with some of the older, more established playback theatre practitioners, if possible, to undertake the leadership training. These are all ways to absorb this 50-year legacy that is a gift, really, to all of us, something we can all, that can enrich our practice, so that we're not starting from the beginning, we're not starting from scratch, we're building on something that has been growing for many, many years now.
So this is all for me. If you want to close with something.
Thank you.
Or this is all?
That's all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sven.
Thank you.